here's the down low for today, right? I don't think I want to just do a podcast.
Yeah.
We won't even touch the surface. There is so much details in the history and the legacy of your life and your family's life that I would feel terrible trying to have a crack at it and, on a podcast, okay?
Right.
So we're just going to have a chat today and we're going to cover a few interesting things. And what I propose is that I would love to do a documentary and invite Daniel Quinn, who's a cinematographer and a award
I met him here
winning.
downstairs with you not that long ago. I met him with you somewhere.
You met Daniel? Okay,
Yeah,
great
yeah.
guy, award-winning cinematographer and filmmaker. And,
Yeah.
Providing that he will agree to jump on board with us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you're good with that. I reckon we'll do a documentary that will give all this justice, right? Because there's some stuff in here that I've been going through over the last week and I'm thinking, holy crap, like, whoa, So
Interesting background.
So now what I'll get you to do is, because I know you love your wine,
Yeah.
and
Pour myself a glass.
sadly, yeah. Well, look, we don't share wine anymore because I don't drink, but this is our sponsor for the episode.
Excellent.
So I will let you, as the wine guru, give him a shout and just have a look first at that COX Ave there and see what you think.
Tawa. Swan Valley, Cabernet Sauvignon. Very nice. I'm currently working on a project up at Swan Valley for Riverbank Winery.
Oh, yeah.
We're just doing the tasting room and such for them.
A tasting room. Yes, it's. I didn't think you touch small stuff like that.
Thanks, mate. Always do things for your mates.
Right. How's that?
That's very nice indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you, sponsor Tawa.
Sponsor Tower. Goff, the man that sent that bottle for you today to try, because I know you like your COX Ave.
Yeah, no, perfect. Very good. I think Swan Valley, I think they're Verdellos, and they've got some really interesting whites up there, which are kind of old school white wines.
White stuff.
Yeah, they're coming back in. Yeah, the white wines.
Okay.
They're sort of in particular summertime.
Right. Well,
You should try. There's a couple of varietals they do up there, which are kind of special for Swan Valley.
Right. He's got a white collection as well.
Okay.
I believe it's very nice. I think I tasted a couple of them a while back, but
Yeah, they're kind of fruity, but they're nice for summer.
yeah. So Greg, you got your parents, Jeff and Kath.
Yep.
They grew up in India, going to boarding school.
Yep.
And that's basically around the end of the whole empire thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
Around that
Partition.
time, right? How did that super unusual start, make them totally unique and unconventional parents who raised you?
Yeah, I guess expat kids. My father's father was actually from Northampton in the UK, where they used to make shoes, and I think he had this dream of being like the first sort of Nike. I'll go and get it made in Southeast Asia or in Asia, and get it done cheaply rather than sort of like the quality shoes. I don't know if you know Northampton in the UK. That's where all the quality shoes get made.
Oh, yeah.
And so he went to India and he basically sent the company broke, which caused a huge falling out with his brother, the brothers. But anyway, Dad stayed there. I mean, he was born in 28 in Hyderabad. And
your mum was born in Hyderabad as well?
Hyderabad as well. They're both born in Hyderabad.
Okay.
And Mum's probably, I think she was about 6, 7 years younger than Dad. They went to school there. They went to there's Bishop Cotton's, which is a kind of expat school. In fact, just this week I caught up with the son of one of my mum's best friends that she was at school with. I mean, we've sort of stayed in touch, so it's become a generational kind of thing. But yeah, they both went there, and that was kind of in Bangalore, which is just quite nearby. I think Hyderabad state was quite unique. But Dad wound up getting an Indian government scholarship to go to the UK and study. He was very, very talented. He finished school very young, and in fact, he was too young to go to university. So he started painting, and he was a smart young man. He wanted to be an artist. He wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
But his father wouldn't, sort of go and get a real job. You can paint in your spare time. And so he went to the Architecture Association in London when he was old enough to get there. I think he was only about 16, 17 when he went to London. And he and his younger brother, came over, and he was studying photography. So both creatives.
Right, yeah.
And so they lived in London, had a ball. I could just imagine being there. Everything he did, he was kind of a bit out there. In fact, even while he was at uni, the guys started a jazz band, and he had no idea. He couldn't play any instruments, but they got him on the double bass, and he had the moves. They literally taped his frets so he could do the chords, and he was up and down the double bass and sort of doing his thing. And he had a lot of swagger, and in fact, Ronnie Scott's, where they used to play, which is a famous jazz bar in London, still there today. And it was where all the actresses and actors all used to hang out. And by all accounts, Dad was pretty popular, from what I've heard,
right,
from his mates subsequent. So
yeah.
he was living the life in London. Mum didn't have that good fortune, but when Dad returned back to Hyderabad, he was actually indentured to part of the deal with the scholarship is you had to work with the Public Works Department back in Hyderabad. And when he returned home was post-partition, post-war, it's kind of like, his boss said, you should head off, go to Canada, go to Australia, just get anywhere out of here. And he said, well, that's all very nice, but I kind of like it here. He had no intention of leaving Hyderabad. And the guy said, and he said, apart from anything, I'm indentured. I've got to do my 2 or 3 years, pay back my dues. And the guy said, only if I can find work for you. And I'm telling you, I can't find any work for you, so you're relieved of that obligation. He said, get the hell out to Australia or something. And so that happened. But Mum, who he'd sort of known, childhood friends, I guess all expat kids kind of knew each other, and anywhere in the world where you go and there's expats, they tend to sort of hang together. And
that's after he finished his...
After he'd finished
university in the UK, went back to Hyderabad, and that's when him and your mum
got together at that time. Anyway, it was we only learned it very late on, but it was a shotgun wedding. Mum got knocked up,
right,
and they got married very quickly, and then they fled to Australia, where the rest of the family had all moved to as well.
Well, I think he was. It was a surprise because he was supposed to come to Australia for a year, and then he ended up not leaving.
Yeah,
and he was supposed to be here for a year and then go back to post-war London.
Yeah.
And then he never left.
He never left.
And that's crazy because when you think about Perth back then, what year was that?
That would have been in the early 50s, probably would have been about 52 or thereabouts.
52, and I mean, Perth in comparison to London, what the hell was in Perth that actually attracted him to stay and not leave?
I remember him telling a story because he said he'd arrived in Australia and he had this all his shirts, handmade silk shirts from India, And he used to say he was very well dressed, and he said it was a bit like people used to sidle away from him in bars. I thought he was gay. But he said, you know, he sort of enjoyed it here. He said the beer was cold, the weather was good, and there was family here, so here's where he stayed. He actually, mum and dad, in fact, we all went to Melbourne just after I was born. In fact, Dad went. He's an advance party. Mum, I'd just been born. Literally waited 8 weeks before she went to Melbourne with my brother and I. Mm-hmm. My sister stayed here with Dad's mother, so she stayed here, and we went to Melbourne and sort of lived there for 4.5 years.
What was your sister's name?
Deborah.
Deborah.
Yeah, she's the oldest. My brother was the middle brother, and I was the youngest. I was the baby.
Right.
So
Mark is the middle.
Mark was the middle, yeah.
And Deborah was the first.
Deborah was the first, yeah.
To be born, and I think she was born 3 months premature. Is that right?
Yeah, I think she may have been. I'm not quite sure about that whole story, you know.
You don't remember that?
It predates me, and I don't recall the stories.
Yeah.
It was, anyway, my brother and I were very close. It was a bit difficult with my sister. I mean, my sister and I, my sister's still alive. My brother died young, unfortunately. Because she stayed here in Perth, and she was the oldest, by the time I came back, say at 5 years old, she was 10. And so it was kind of like this big difference. And because we didn't really know each other, I don't think we had that real close bond that, you know, one would expect if you'd all grown up together. But, I mean, we still have that bond. I still love my sister, and
of course,
vice versa. But it wasn't strong, whereas my brother and I were inseparable. And so, so I developed a lot of his bad habits as well.
Yeah, of course, as you do. But Jeff, your dad, actually admitted in 1965 recording the only way he became an architect is because his dad forced him to become an architect, because he didn't want him to be an artist and a painter.
Correct.
And it was a good career, after all, to pursue versus becoming an architect. An artist, especially back then. I mean, artists are still, you know, not really. It's not a career where you can build a life.
A lot of artists don't make much during their life, and then it's
exactly
their heirs and assignees, the real beneficiaries.
Yeah, so it's really interesting how that happened to him. So, did your dad tell you don't let anyone else pick your career, or was it like more than do what I say and not what I did, or how was that?
I didn't get any encouragement, and nor did I get any discouragement. Dad didn't give me any real guidance on what
So this was something you've decided on yourself?
Yeah, well, I think, I was probably, I think fair to say my brother Mark was Mum's favourite. I was probably Dad's favourite, and what happened, so I was pretty close to Dad, but Dad was completely out there. When he was here, he's just a party animal. And like Fridays, they'd sort of be at the office till all hours, and half the time, all night, he'd be out in nightclubs and things like that, and he'd get home and he'd get the rounds of the kitchen from Mum, who was not too happy about him being out and about, and he'd try and disappear from the house, and she'd sort of say, no, you can take the kid with you. And, so I used to Dad would disappear on Saturdays, and not that he did much site work, but he'd go and visit projects and such. So I was going around with him to building sites, on Saturday afternoons when he was doing his penance, and I'd be out there with him, and walking around building sites. So it was never anything else ever entered my mind that I wasn't going to do it.
He was a successful young man. At 28, he won the Perth Town Hall competition in 1959.
Yeah,
right?
It was extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, how old were you then? Do you remember that?
I was born in '56, so so he won. He won the competition 4 years later.
Yeah,
and then we moved to Perth.
That's a huge deal back then.
It was.
Right?
It was huge. Yeah, no, it was a seriously good job. He had a really good job. He was working for a top firm in Melbourne at the time, and he was a sort of right-hand man to Sir Osborne McCutcheon. It was a company called Bates Smart McCutcheon. They dropped the McCutcheon for I don't know why. No respect there, but Sir Osborne, he worked, and in fact, Sir Osborne wanted him when he won the competition, offered him a partnership in their practice.
Okay. Did he have his own practice then?
No. He was just working salaried architect and not particularly well paid at the time either. I don't think so. But they were doing the best projects at the time. They did ICI House in Melbourne, which is, today a brilliant office tower. They did the MLC building in North Sydney, which is a classic modernist building. They were at the cutting edge of modern architecture in the eastern states. Right. And Dad had the benefit of working alongside him. And of course that was, I think Dad was already into modernism very much, but I think it cemented it when he was working alongside Sir Osborne.
So he worked in the eastern states for a
not that long, about 4 or 5 years. I mean, he was he worked full time, but he also used to do a bit of tutoring and lecturing at RMIT. He always spent a lot of time with students. It's early in his career and late in his career. In fact, when he in the 1990. And I'd been in the practice for, a decade by then, and working alongside him, he decided to go and spend a bit more time at the University of WA, and he became the adjunct professor of architecture there.
Right.
And students loved him. I mean, he was a great guy.
Yeah. Well, being close to him and being your dad's favourite, that definitely had some influence on you choosing that path.
Oh, definitely. Even like this whole thing about Dad babysitting me. I mean, even when I was going to school, we were living in South Perth, and I was sent to school in Claremont. And I used to get the bus home, and Mum would say, on Fridays, she'd say, why don't you go into your dad's office in West Perth and get out there and come home with him? And this was this sort of ruse to try and get Dad not to hang out. And of course I used to go up to the office and I'd be doing my homework in the office. He would have been out to lunch with all his mates. I mean, they'd all come pouring into the office late afternoon after a good lunch, and they'd go into the boardroom. And I just used to go in the boardroom and sit in the corner, and these guys were just hilarious. Right. They're all pissed. They're all just, shouting and telling lies was a phrase that Dad used to use.
Right.
And I was there, it was full of smoke, full of booze, probably not the best place for me to be hanging out. But I'd just be sitting quietly soaking this lot up, and I wanted a piece of this.
Yeah.
I got to have some of this.
Yeah.
So it was, and of course, inevitably Dad would keep going out and I'd get sent home. One of the office juniors would have to drive me home at about 8 o'clock at night when they decided to head off into a nightclub or something.
And kick on, yep.
Yeah. So,
right. What was the most memorable, aside from that shaped your career as an architect, growing up with your dad?
Apart from those experiences,
yeah.
There was nothing. I suppose when I was studying, when I was still at high school, and Dad was the guy. I mean, the 60s and into the 70s, he was definitely the top dog in architecture in this town. And and so he's always there. People wanted to meet him, talk to him, things like that. But the concert hall, because he did Council House, and after Council House he did the concert hall.
That's right.
And that was huge. I mean, when that was happening, and I was just in year 12, and that was telecast live, and it was on TV, and everyone was there, and they followed by the so-called Ball of the Century, which was outside on the forecourt of the concert hall on the riverside.
Yeah.
And every personality in town attended that Ball of the Century. And so, it was a pretty Hollywood kind of thing to see.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
I guess
and that's your dad.
And that was Dad.
Yeah.
And Mum was very glamorous. And,
yeah.
She could give it as much as take it. I mean, she didn't. She wasn't the very tame housewife.
Very flamboyant.
She was very corporate. She was a corporate wife, I think, but she was out there. She had her own character. She was crazy too. So, sort of getting brought up by those two, you couldn't help but not be different.
Who was more chaotic in your eyes?
Oh,
your
Dad. I mean,
Mum?
Mum still maintained a household. But for instance, they sent us to a communist school, primary school, when we came back from.
That's right. You and Mark.
Yeah, the two of us.
You were learning Russian there.
Yeah,
they went us.
It was a completely crazy school called Islander. Now, once again, we're living in South Perth.
Yeah.
The school was literally in the bush in Morley Park, as it was called then, which is around it wasn't far from where the Galleria shopping centre is today. But in those days, it was bush.
Right.
And so we'd get picked up in the combi van, which had been sort of converted as a school bus, and Joan Smith would come and pick us up, or Renee Heisler, and they'd take us back to the school. And it was very experimental. All the staff were university lecturers. So, it was like this amazing kind of education where, as a 5-year, I went straight into year 1. So because my grandmother had been living with us and she taught me to read and write and that sort of stuff. So I was kind of ahead of myself, and so they just said, no, don't worry about kinder, you can go straight into year 1. And which resulted in me, when I started uni, a bit like Dad. I was 16 when I finished high school. And
what age were you when you were Slander learning Russian?
I did 3 years, 5, 6, and 7, I think it was.
5, 6, and 7 in that school.
In that school. Yeah.
Now, tell me about this.
That's age 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, not years.
Age,
5.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember that teacher that fled to Berlin after kidnapping a boy called
Renner.
Barry, and you had, I think, your life turned into a spy novel at that time, by the sounds of it, because you had the CIB show up at your front door, and
well,
that's crazy.
It was well, they reckon Mum was the secretary of the Communist Party, which she never was,
right?
And they thought she may have been part of it. Renee Heisler, because they ran the school for 3 years, and all the kids there, the fee-paying kids, basically were also subsidising an Indigenous child too. So there are Aboriginal kids, most of them the kids of stolen generation women, and the women would be working in the school as well as teachers' aides, and because we'd get lunches, preparing school lunches and things like that. So they'd be there, their kids would be getting this education. Now Renee wound up heading off to East Berlin, behind the Iron Curtain, as it was in those days. So took Barry Mackenzie, his name was, an unfortunate name, Bazza Mackenzie.
Barry Mackenzie.
Bazza.
Yeah.
They changed his name to Patrice after Patrice Lumumba, the African
revolutionist. Right.
Yeah. And who also, I think, was with Che Guevara, came and spent some time in Africa with him. So it was pretty out there. So they named him, and their view was they're going to get him very well educated, bring him back, and he'd be a sort of leader to lead the Indigenous people into a better place.
Right.
So they were out there, but unfortunately, it sort of got Barry went with the mother's approval, but somebody got onto it, and the journos got in and sort of said, "Oh, your child's been stolen," which he wasn't.
Right. So all this.
He wound up getting, they became very political, and then they had to come back, send him back. And the poor guy, I don't know what happened to him, but last I heard he was in somewhere east of Kalgoorlie, living in a community out there, which probably wouldn't have been a great place. After being exposed to the East Berlin, I mean, how cool would that have been? A cool place today. It would have been an amazing place back then too, with this sort of classical education of, which is the sort of stuff that I was getting at Islander. We had science, we had to learn Russian, we had to learn French, we had to do maths, we had to do gymnastics, you had to, healthy mind, healthy body kind of thing. And even the maths was so advanced, I remember, because Shirley Delahunty was my maths teacher. Now, she was a maths lecturer at UWA. Her maiden name was Shirley Strickland, the runner, Olympic runner.
Right.
And so she was my maths teacher in grade 1, 2 and 3. And she did this thing, it was called the Trachtenberg method. And I think this was a guy I think he's a Czech guy who wound up in prison in Russia. And he developed this kind of maths. And what you could do, and I don't recall it now, because I got basically retrained when I went to a government school after that, and I remember going to the government school, and I could do this very complex arithmetic in my head when I was in grade 3 or grade 4. And the teachers go, "But how did you do it?" I just said, "I just did it, write the number down." And they thought I was some kind of crazy savant, sort of Rain Man over there.
Yeah.
And the teachers would go, it's like, "Greg, just do the maths this way, will you please? Yes, I know you got the right answer. Yes, and I know you got it quicker than me, but we want you to just show us how you got there. So this is the way you show us how you got there."
Right.
But, we're grade 1 and 2, we're doing things like cutting open frogs and pulling out the beating hearts and things like this, in science. But everything was kind of, at the same time. And I was lucky I didn't get bitten by a snake. I used to go out and chop wood. We'd have to go and cut wood in the bush to come back.
Well, it was all bush almost
so it was
then,
all
wasn't
wood.
it?
Yeah, so but we used to cross over the road, and it used to flood. It was this sort of swamp lands with paper barks and whatever. And I remember, you'd be going there, and half the time you're swimming through the bush, because just going out doing stuff.
And that's big. How long did you live in South Perth? It was across from Perth Zoo. Is that right?
In Onslow Street. Yeah, lived there for a long time. I mean, when we came back, we lived in North Perth and Mount Lawley for a bit. Then Mum found this house, fell in love with it on Onslow Street.
That's right. There was almost like a 3-apartment there.
It was. It had been subdivided. It was a big old house. Apparently, it's one of the first homesteads in South Perth. Up there, and would have been farm. It was at the top of the hill and farmland.
And your mum fell in love with that.
Oh, yeah. And somebody divided it into a couple of flats. Anyway, we moved in. Dad pulled it, converted it back to something like it would have been back in the day, certainly from a planning viewpoint.
Right.
But even at one stage, we had my grandmother, Mum's mum, was living with us for a while. And the guys that were doing all the work would come in and they were doing all the stuff. My grandma used to, or Nana is what we called her, she would go in the middle of the afternoon. She'd go and have her afternoon nap, and she'd walk into what was a cupboard. But at the back of the cupboard there was another door, because this is all part of the thing. And Laurie Lana, who I got to know, and he was doing it, He just thought she was some kind of crazy old lady, just goes into the cupboard for a couple of hours and then comes out and wants a cup of tea, you know, sort of like, you know. And then, because that room, it was kind of, otherwise you didn't even know it was there.
You didn't know there was another room there, right. Well, what do you remember the most about your mum through those times, Greg? Because she's from what I've read, that she was very classy, flamboyant woman.
Yeah,
and she loved dressing up, and she's popular for her colourful velvet 2 or 3 piece dresses.
I remember they did a thing on her, the hostess or the mostess, I think they called her.
Yeah, and she loved cooking curry for everyone.
Curry, that was our staple. I mean, we all different curries. Mum was a great
I've tried the curry that you cook, and that's
Mum's old recipe.
Insane.
Yeah, so I've only got a couple. She had a lot more than that, but I've only got vindaloo and korma. But
right,
I'll probably, once I quit the day job, whenever that happens, I might start looking at cooking a few other types.
Oh, right. Okay.
And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Right.
But no, she was colour. I mean, my mother was highly intelligent, as was Dad. So there was no difference.
There's no gap.
No gap in the intellect, and in fact, that's why they kind of really bounced off each other, and pretty fiery interchanges from time to time too. So. We saw it all.
Yeah.
But, Mum loved to entertain. And, like we always, they might used to say to us kids, you kids, you can be anything but boring. Boring was like the cardinal sin. Anyone who's boring, bores, lock the doors was what they used to yell. Sort of like, okay, so you had to somehow sort of have your patter. I was actually pretty shy myself, so.
Wow.
But, you sort of had to develop this sort of other personality kind of thing to cut it with them. But yeah, we always, the kids were always included, like we all sat in the adult parties and stuff. And they were definitely out there. Mum in particular she was Perth's first fag hag, so they used to have this party was either the first or last Friday of each month, and it was just open house.
Everyone's invited.
Everyone's invited. So people you didn't even
as long
know
as they were
would be
interesting.
As long as they're interesting, no board.
That's right.
But the gays loved it. So we always used to have a lot of gays in the place. So
yeah.
So there's one wouldn't want to be homophobic in my household because you were never going to be. Yeah. Because it was everyone.
And that's every month your mum put that on. She cooked for everybody.
Yeah.
She entertained everyone.
There was always a curry guy. I mean, it wasn't so much a curry. She wouldn't cook for that because those parties are big, 50, 60, 100 people. It's just rammed. Sort of house party, BYO house parties, and she might have a punch or something going on.
What was that about back then? Do you know? Why did she was really keen on entertaining that many people every month?
That was just
the way.
Well, Perth in those days, there weren't that many restaurants and things. You could go to the pub. The pub closed at 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
It was like, I mean, you had to have your own party. You had to create your own fun. Yeah. And so
then once you do it really well.
And then that just becomes a norm. And so, like people would just rock up. And we had one funny night, there was this bloke, David Folkes Taylor. David, a gay man who had, was importing all exotic furniture, modernist furniture, Danish, designs from the 50s and Marimekko fabrics. And, he was the guy that introduced real style, and he had a place in on the river in Crawley where he had it basically in his back shed, and then he built a place on Broadway which is still there and is now where the Institute of Architects occupy. It was David Folkes Taylor, then unfortunately got killed in a car crash, and Jim Brandt, and now it's the Institute of Architects. Beautiful old building designed by Julia Selisher. Stunning building, kind of has sort of a little bit of, it was just very modern. It was beautiful. Unfortunately, it's been, the internals used to have these sort of floating floors. It was like these staircases that floated through space, and these platforms just suspended in space. Absolutely fantastic. It's not like that anymore, sadly. But David rocked up one day, and as you identified, we were across the road from the zoo in Onslow Street. Our garden always looked a shambles. There was sort of knee-high grass out the front, sort of the weeds sort of going, the so-called lawn. And we had these 2 golden retriever dogs. And David rocks up, comes sprinting into the house, and he's locking the doors, running around, and then subsequently passed out. And what's going on? So he comes to. There's lions. There's lions. Because you could hear the lions roaring. Because as it's sort of in the early evening, and the lions had all been roaring. He sees these 2 golden retrievers in the lawn, and it was just absolutely chaotic.
And he just passed out.
Yeah, just passed out.
Play dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Again.
So,
yep.
It's foolish when we pointed out it was just the dogs.
Perth would have been literally, it's a different place altogether. Do you have a lot of photos from those times? Yourself? Your family?
I don't. I think my sister's sort of got the archivist for the family. She's got a lot.
Right.
She's got a lot of stuff.
She would have
she
some
sort of
gold.
kind of knows the family tree and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, there aren't that many, unfortunately, but, Mum and Dad weren't out there taking photos all the time.
Yeah.
There's probably plenty around in various households around Perth, but, I think they was very much of the mind you're living in the moment. You don't record it. You just,
right.
It's a bit like, going to a concert and sort of filming it or enjoy it, watch it.
Yeah. And there was a few things that I read up on, Greg, that, your mum and dad certainly had their challenges and, difficult times in marriage, just like everybody does, right? Especially 2 big characters like that.
Yeah, well, Dad was certainly, he played up quite a lot. He was quite popular with the ladies all his life, I think.
And apparently your mum used to, every time there was a big problem, she'd run off to Paris and
she would get on
Europe
a plane out.
Gone.
It was just like she'd go off to London, hang out there. We're talking the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, and your dad would chase her to go and
stay for a while, and then he'd go and chase her down. And I think we as kids became very independent because we just got left by ourselves. I mean, they'd probably be arrested today. Because I remember one time, Dad, one of these things, I was only about 12 or 13, and Dad by this time had demolished the family home and was going to build some flats on it, or some townhouses. And he'd already done another place in South Perth. And so we'd moved into a couple of flats, and Mum and Dad were living in one, my brother and I were in the other. And my sister was there for a little bit, but she moved on because she by that time was 18 or something, so she took off. But my brother and I were there, and we had our own flat. Mum and Dad were next door, and then Mum took off and Dad went to follow her, so we were left to our own devices. And my uncle they had a restaurant around the corner called the Hindquarter, so he would pop by and just check on us every now and again, but the place was mayhem. But I was only 12 or 13. My brother was sort of 16, so, probably not that best parenting, but we survived it.
But apparently you come back with like insane records and music from Europe that weren't even close to being released in Perth.
I do remember would have been about 1972. I was in year 12 and I was really into music by that time, and sort of 16 years old, and we had sort of developed the same sort of things as Mum and Dad. Was always open house every Friday. Open house, people would just rock up and we'd play tunes, and we used to drink and smoke pot, whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember Mum came back after one of her sojourns in London, and she came back with 3 albums. Lou Reed, Transformer. It was David Bowie's album that he had just released, and I don't know what that was.
David Bowie, yeah.
And J.J. Cale, 1919, who used to play in the Velvet Underground with Lou Reed.
Wow.
So these are like 3, and I didn't even know these bands, and nobody knew those bands.
No one would have.
There are a couple of places in Perth where, underground vinyl joints and that sort of thing. But we were there, and Transformer, I just love Transformer. Listen to it today as much.
Wow.
And even some of the other albums. I mean, one of the greatest songs, and I've actually asked for it to be included in my when I go. I've told my kids this is where we go. This is it's one of the songs you play when people are coming into the chapel or the crematorium, wherever it is. It's Lou Reed's Intro followed by Sweet Jane. And it is just a cracking song to this day. You should listen to it.
Right.
It's cool.
Right. So the music was kind of a reasonable trade-off.
It was. Time. And, we were kind of like superstars amongst oh, you see their collection. Yeah. I mean, I just sort of think back because we wound up moving back to South Perth. And we were back living in the old Onslow Street with the townhouses. And we were living there. My brother and I had a huge collection of vinyl. And I remember when we eventually moved, and I think back on it because we didn't treat the vinyl all that well. We just put it on, and even we had this thing: if we didn't like a track on a bit of vinyl, we'd actually scratch across it. So the stylist would come and just skip the song and just jump to the next song. It's very, very crude. Not good for the stylist, nor good for the record, but, we treated the albums very badly.
Right.
Not those particular ones, but some that we didn't like. But I remember when we shifted house, we got a 6x4 trailer, just a little trailers you used to get, 6 foot by 4 foot, and we had that half full of vinyl that wound up down the tip.
Wow.
Yeah, criminal. But
at the tip.
Yeah. We moved on.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but we had so much vinyl. We were just getting records all the time.
How much vinyl have you got now?
None.
You would have had some reasonable collection of vinyl.
We had some serious stuff.
You got rid of everything.
Oh, no, well, we didn't. We just, they were the damaged ones. We got rid of that. We still had, because vinyl was still it. But then, as you started getting into, tapes and CDs and things overtook. I remember. So that would probably carbon date. It must have been my first CD. I remember I got a CD player, and I got a free CD, and I got Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. Had just sort of come out, so that would have been in the early 70s, mid-70s or something. It hadn't just come out, but it was an album that I really liked. I think it's probably the Stones' best album ever.
Do you remember your grandparents?
Never met my dad's father.
He was also a builder or architect or something like that?
No, Dad's father was the shoe guy.
The shoe guy?
Yep.
And
my mother, I didn't meet my mother's father either. I did meet my father's father. I didn't meet my mother's father.
Okay.
But his dad came out here with his mum, and and typical kind of Anglo-Indian sort of family. The matriarch was all important, so on the weekends we'd always go to Nana's house.
Okay.
Now my paternal grandfather Harold was blind. He went blind. He had a brain tumour, I think, which caused him to go blind. So he was always there, and it was fine. He used to chat away, and it was amusing. But Nana Howlett was she was the person, and we used to sit around with her. She was fantastic. My mother's mother, on the other hand, she came out. She stayed in India when Mum and Dad. But she came out late, and as I say, she lived with us for a period. And once again, I was very close to her as well, but she was totally ditzy. I think she had sort of been through the 20s, and she was a party girl, expat Indian back in the days of the Raj. You can just imagine what that would have been.
Yeah.
And so she was sort of the flapper outfits and feathers in the hair and stuff like that.
Crazy, yeah. You remember much of those days?
I don't know. Not that. I saw those in photos and things of her. But I do remember she was always. She used to smoke like a chimney, and she used to drink brandy. She used to love a brandy, and she used to go 2 fingers and sort of invert them downwards into the glass. Just 2 fingers, please, because I used to pour a brandy for her.
Right.
Instead of like down at the bottom of the glass, she'd get this sort of huge measure of brandy and she used to have, they bought out these sort of, they weren't the slim ones, they bought these short cigarettes out for a while, trying to make them.
The Camel?
No, they weren't Camels, no, they were with filters. But all my mates used to come around and Nana would light up a ciggy and she'd literally, and her cheeks would go hollowing out and you'd see this thing go zzz, and then she'd suck it back, almost in one puff. And then just sort of like a fire-breathing dragon, the smoke's coming up for the next minute or so just as she breathed. I mean, I don't even know how she did it. I smoked for a fair while. Probably shouldn't have because I was slightly asthmatic, but all my mates would go and you just sort of she'd light it and you'd see this thing just burning down as she's sucking it in.
Aqualungs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you go to university, you become an architect.
Yep.
You come out of uni. What was the first move as soon as you finish uni?
I actually got married. I got married young. I was only 21. And it was a girl that I didn't know her at high school, but she was at high school with me, the same high school, but I didn't know her. We met literally after year 12. We got together. We split up for a bit, got back together, and then got married. And so that's pretty much the first thing I did after uni. And it was actually I rang this guy Jerry Richardson literally from the wedding, and Jerry was he worked for my dad in the early. He did most of the drawings. If you get the drawings for Council House, GNR and the title block, he used to do all the. He was like the guy. And he was virtually family. He was like another brother. And so I rang him because he obviously wasn't there. And he was in Dubai. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, don't know, I guess go and get a job with Dad. He said, don't do that. Don't do that. He said, if you can be to Dubai by Christmas. So this is in November, the end of November, November 29. And he said, if you can be here by Christmas, you've got the gig here.
In Dubai.
Mm-hmm. And so I went and spoke to my new wife and said, what do you think about going to Dubai? Yeah, let's do it. And at that time, Perth was in a bit of a recession, late 70s, and so there wasn't a job. Well, I'm sure Dad would have found me something to do, but there wasn't really a job here anyway. So I went to Dubai and had lived there. That was kind of crazy, once again.
And again,
21.
back then, Dubai in the 70s, I mean, that would have been surrounded.
Yeah,
That's a desert.
I actually found a photo of the apartment building that we lived in, and I mean, you see all these things of Dubai, Sheikh Zayed Road, which is sort of the drag that's got all the buildings that everyone knows, that knows it goes to Dubai. That's it. But at that time, there was Sheikh Zayed Road did not exist. It was just desert.
Yeah.
There was one building just being built, which is the World Trade Center. But everything was on Dira side. So there was Dira and Bur Dubai.
There wouldn't even been that many roads. And literally actually stepping in, you're walking in sand.
You were. and in fact, I remember because I arrived, it was like it was around midnight on Christmas Eve. Or Christmas Day. Anyway, Jerry picked us up from the airport. We wound up going back to his apartment and stayed up all night drinking piss and reminiscing and telling stories. And I remember going out onto the balcony. The sun's come up and down on the thing. Is this puddle of water, or dirty, filthy, probably sewage. I don't know. It was pretty nasty down there. And I remember telling Janet, she called her, I said, look at that, that's oil.
Wow.
I just got
oil.
Oil. What? I go, no, it's fucking sewage. Don't step in that. But literally, we're just nearby, and this is how it was, there was literally a barasti, which is palm leaves, because one of the building materials, because they're nomadic, the Arabs, and the building materials, well, they'd use palm leaves to make these sort of houses, but they'd use it as a fence. And so literally we're at this building looking down, and immediately down was this shanty that had been put together. The guy's got a couple of goats wandering around and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was. And
the Badawis. And
this was literally next to the clock tower. Now, anyone who's been to Dubai will know the clock tower roundabout in Dubai, which is on the intersection that goes to the airport and then up to Sharjah.
Mm-hmm.
Really important, and that's still there today. But we're literally next to the roundabout, and there's a nomad there with his goats and his barasti
crazy
and hut.
Early 70s.
77.
77.
Yeah, right there, Christmas Eve, 77.
Wow. Right. And you ended up staying there?
Stayed there for about, it wasn't that long actually. The company wound up that I was working for there, wound up, everything went into recession there too. It had hit there late. And so I'd planned to be there for a couple of years, indefinitely. But that sort of ran out. So we decided we'd head off to Europe. Now, I'd bought a car. In those days, cars, the import duty and sales tax on foreign cars in Australia was just ridiculous.
It still is.
100%. Oh, nothing like what it was. I can tell you, I bought the 3 Series BM that had just come out, and I borrowed the money from Dad to buy the thing. Now, I remember I paid 8,000 Aussie dollars. That's a fully loaded BM 320 auto. Nice car. The same thing, you could get a Mitsubishi or a Chrysler in Perth, and you'd pay the same amount of money for it. Now, I drove that car. I kept it and drove it, put 100,000 Ks, a lot of it in Europe, driving around Europe, bought it back. The engine was screwed after about 110,000 Ks, and I sold it for $11,500 with a broken donk and 110,000 Ks on the clock. It was wrecked. Sort of like,
Yeah.
it still got 11.5 grand.
Wow.
No, it was just nuts. And so what actually happened, and it was a kind of thing, it was a thing people were doing at the time. You could go and buy a car there, hang out there, and you had to be away for 2 years, and then you could bring it in sales tax and duty free.
Sales tax and duty free.
Yeah, well, you didn't because I buy it in Germany.
Because
I
it's
got
second hand, you owned it there for a couple of years.
2 years. You had to be with it for 2 years. Literally, you had to be with it. You couldn't even leave it. And there's another story to be told there at some stage.
Right.
But so that was how it kind of worked. And so we, Janet and I went off. We went to Germany to pick up the car because it was going to be delivered to Dubai. But because we finished early, went and picked it up in Munich. So I spent a couple of weeks in Munich waiting for the car to be ready, picked it up. In the interim, my dad had met this guy named John Corner, who was based in the Costa del Sol in Marbella. And so I rang him and said, do you need someone? He's an Aussie guy, but also trained at the Architecture Association where Dad was. And he was just never going back to Oz, really.
Mm-hmm.
He said, yeah, I've got a job for you. I said, when can I start? He said, I want you yesterday. And I said, well, I can't be there. But I will come down, but I want to have a bit of a look on the way down. So it took a couple of weeks to get to Marbella and back into it. And that was fun. John was nuts. I'd talk about fiery relationships. He was married to this Finnish woman, Ilona. Ilona was a physiotherapist, and she was like this fiery temper, and she's built, she's a beautiful woman, there's sort of she's really tall,
Amazon,
really Amazon-like woman. And John was, she'd had a couple of kids with him, and, she used to call him Aussie bastard maker because they were never married. And, I remember you go there, but he and Ilona had this thing, and we had this thing. I was in Marbella, and it was August. We'd had a house, and we got the people that owned it came back early and threw us out of the house, and we didn't have anywhere to live. So we're living in, basically John said, well, I've got a combi van. You can stay in the combi van and just come in and use the bathroom in the house. But I remember the first day we arrived up there, they'd had this fight, and I think he'd thrown all the clothes out and the tree and set it alight, from the balcony. There was a tree there. We arrived, there's black clothing, a light, and sort of ash and sort of stuff happening. Alona's screaming at him, he's screaming at her. I think she'd broken her arm. He'd probably broken her arm. I don't know what had happened. But and Janet and I going like, what the fuck?
Walk into.
Yeah, what's this? And so we had this. It was awful. It was awful, really, because fortunately it was kind of Spain. It was warm and it was beautiful, and so I was going into work all day, and Janet would come with me, and her job was to go and find us a flat, but couldn't find anything anywhere. And so we're there for the whole of August, because of course August is the place is just mobbed. But after that, it was really good because John was doing a lot of work for Arab clients. And one of his clients had a penthouse, like this big apartment block on the beach, right in the middle of town. And he went, and so his client said, well, we could use his apartment. So Janet and I moved into this sort of pretty bijou kind of flat with these amazing views over the Mediterranean. And we lived there for the remainder of our time in Marbella before I wound up going up to London. My mum and dad came and visited us in Spain, and it was late in the year, and they were going off to London after that, and they said, why don't you come up to London? I said, yeah, that's great. So went to John, said, John, mate, we're heading off to London. He said, but you can't. I said, well, I can, but why? What's your problem? He said, well, you're the only one who knows about this job. I'd been designing this palace for him in Kuwait, or for his client in Kuwait. Massive, it was like 5 apartments, this sort of huge, grand Arab palace, very much so that, you know, the brothers and sisters had their own apartments, like any palaces, you know, even European palaces, they're full of apartments where people have their own place. But then there's got the, like in Arab world, it's a majlis where they all go and, you know, to meet and dining rooms. So there are these big common areas with these palaces, and they used to entertain in a grand style. Anyway, I'd done all the design work on it, and so I knew the job, and he said, well, who's going to do it? And I said, not my problem, pal. You know, you knew I was working holiday. And he said, well, what are you going to do when you get to London? I said, I don't know, get a job. There's a mob called Chapman Taylor. I hear they like Aussies. They'll probably give me a job. And he said, well, why don't you document this? Now, I don't know what he thought. I mean, he must have been mad. And I was certainly mad, thinking I could even do it. Well, I could, because I was still only 22.
Wow.
And
22.
I was 22, so I had my 23rd birthday in London, and he said, well, you know, you could get some guys, and you know, we could set up an office. So I went up. I said, oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. Went there. Set up an office for him, employed half a dozen guys, mostly older than me, thank goodness. Actually knew what they're doing. And so I was sort of running an office in London when 22. I had my 23rd birthday. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And then I wound up going out to Kuwait to sort of see it come out of the ground. Yeah, it was nuts.
That's crazy.
It was crazy.
So
I think one of the things, in fairness, I wasn't your average 22, 23-year-old because, you know, the whole way through uni I was spending my summer holidays working in the office. So I'd been working in architect, and Dad used to do these developments, so I'd work on sites, everything from doing demolition work to a lot of the building work. So I'd put the roof on a couple of his developments. He was in a syndicate with a bunch of guys, so I'd be labouring and then working. So I was probably more competent than most
architects.
Kids. Yeah, well, not architects, but certainly architects of my age. I was way ahead of those.
At that time, I mean, you had an unfair advantage, you know, living in a home that you grew up in with, you know, your dad being an award-winning architect himself.
Well, it wasn't just him. I remember, you know,
and then everybody else around. Yeah,
the people that used to come around, you know, talking those parties that they used to have, the artists, all the great West Australian artists, they would be around our house. I knew them all, still know them. They're still family friends. Those that are still alive. But even like there was a big architectural conference came around, and we had a guy named Buckminster Fuller. I don't know if you've ever heard of Buckminster Fuller. He was a guy who designed the geodesic domes, you know, those domes that sort of got together. Quite stunning engineering thing. But he's around the house. Cedric Price is around the house. Cedric Price was this sort of wild boy who was in London, you know, who only died not that long ago, sadly. But he had designed this thing called the Fun Palace. Now, not that I knew that when I was a kid, because this is only when I'm about 8 years old. No, 10 years old. I was 10 years old when that happened. And he's a larger-than-life character on the world stage, and he designed this Fun Palace, which subsequently got, I say, ripped off, like the Pompidou Centre in Paris was basically a building that Cedric Price had designed years before. Yeah. And that was Piano and Rogers did that. Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers. But
how old were you when you finished uni?
21. No, sorry, no. When I finished uni, I was 21. Yeah, I had my 22nd birthday in Dubai.
Yep.
23rd birthday in London.
Right. So you moved pretty much out of uni, got married,
Took off for a couple of
took
years.
off with your wife.
Yeah.
And how many years before you returned back?
It was only a couple of years. So, you know, the car was the anchor that we had, so it would have been 2.5 years, I guess.
Okay.
So, you know, maybe closer to 3, but sort of came back and then joined Dad. And then,
Right.
You know, so started working with Dad. That was fabulous because I think Dad's interest, I mean, his real architectural, as Howlett and Bailey, I mean, was during the
Don
60s and the 70s. That was his 2 decades. Of, you know, he was the guy.
Yeah.
Toward the end of the 70s, you know, or even in the middle of the 70s, he was getting into other things. He had a restaurant with his brother, and he was doing townhouse developments, and he was sort of a little bit distracted. I think the market was dying off too, so I think he'd sort of lost a bit of interest. So I suspect had I not gone into architecture and come back around that time, he might have gone and done, you know, might have turned to development full time. I don't know. But then he got back into it, and we had some really fun times. The 80s, that decade working alongside Dad was just brilliant. Yeah, it was.
So when you came back, how long you stayed working with your dad?
Well, basically, I was in the company. Oh, well, Dad was with us. I told you he went off and did, toward the end of the 80s, he went and became the professor of architecture at UWA, but he was still working until my brother died in 91, and that sort of rocked the whole family.
That's
Mum
very
in particular. And Dad then had a stroke a couple of years, a really bad stroke, probably should have killed him, it didn't. And that was a couple of years later. So yeah, I had about 10 great years with Dad as working together. And then it was sort of all kind of a bit ordinary after that. And so I was there. My brother had joined the practice too. He went and studied architecture late, but his heart was never really in it. I think in reality I think he thought it was going to be an easy ride to come and join the family business.
What did he want to do? What was his passion, Mark?
Party animal. He was just out there, yeah, and he was like, yeah, wild child. He used to have a letterhead called "Let's Party," and here for a good. The byline was "Here for a good time, not a long time."
Wow.
It was prophetic. He died at 38. Yeah. So
do you think his upbringing, being the first, being older than you,
yeah,
right? The lifestyle had any influence on his direction?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I think he was kind of like, I think he was slightly psycho, to tell the truth. I think back on it, I mean, he was out there, you know, and everything, and I don't know whether he was just rebelling or what, but there wasn't anything that he wouldn't take on. It was kind of, you know, I mean, these days, I don't know, you know, these days they'd probably say it's ADHD or something like that, and, you know, undiagnosed or whatever. But
back then in 91, how old was he, Greg?
he died at 38 years old, yeah. So and he sort of went and did a whole bunch of things like, you know, it was like I was a few years younger, and we wound up doing first-year architecture together because he'd failed year 12 and had to repeat year 12, so I sort of caught up a bit, and then he did first-year architecture and failed that, and by that time, so when he repeating first-year architecture, we both went into the same class. So I caught up. So I was 16 when I started, and he was 19 or thereabouts.
Right.
But and then he dropped out halfway through first year and went off and did a whole bunch of other stuff, and while I was when I was travelling around, he studied quantity surveying and kill me now. I mean, he was never going to be, measuring areas and stuff like that. That was never going to be him.
Right.
In fact, a funny story. There was the guy. He worked for a company called Ryder Hunt, which was like one of the big quantity surveying companies, and they used to get cadetships, so they used to get paid while they were studying, and then they were indentured to the company afterwards. And they went off to Northbridge one day on a Friday and got completely pissed, and came back to the Ryder Hunt office, which is in the Cloisters building in the city. But the first sex shop had just opened in Northbridge. So Mark went in and bought a dildo and came back.
As you do.
And stirred the boss's coffee.
No.
got sent out of the office. You're sacked. It was
out of control. He was well and truly out of control.
He was out of control, boy. Yeah.
Did you miss him a lot?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we kind of had a bit of a falling out towards the end. Our wives, my Janet didn't particularly like Mark at all, and probably have had very good reason for it. But so there was a kind of like that was kind of a little bit difficult. So that sort of. We're still like we're working together and doing stuff together, but
normal family stuff.
Normal family stuff, yeah. And so, it was kind of So he got divorced, and then he remarried. By that time, he got onto the gear and that sort of thing. So he's probably in a dodgy space. Yeah.
Jeez, not good. How did he die?
Heroin overdose.
Overdose. Damn. Man. And what effect did that have on your mum and your dad?
Oh, Mum was shattered. I don't think she ever recovered. I mean, she lived for another, when was it, 91? When did Mum die? It must have been 2005, 10 years ago, yeah. Yeah, so it was, she never really recovered, I don't think. She used to, I mean, she was okay. She lived, she looked after Dad. Dad had the stroke, so she looked after him as best she could until she couldn't. She couldn't, in care, and put him in care around the corner from the house.
And she was still the real family
matriarch.
Deal, like she still looked after him. She still went and visited all the time.
No. It was essential. We actually had to literally put him in a nursing home that was only 200 metres from where Mum was living, so she could walk around. And so basically, Dad's intellect, he had his intellect there all the time. He'd lost his communication, but the intellect was always there. And all the nurses at the nursing home loved him. I mean, there was something going on there. He just like he was a chick magnet. Even when he couldn't speak and he's old, still charming the nurses.
Oh man, poor mum. Seriously, right?
Yeah, but
okay. She wasn't even safe then.
No.
Right.
There used to be some old dear they used to call her hot pants. She used to fancy herself she'd be there in the silver, literally hot pants. I mean, there's a 90-year-old crow in a sort of singlet. I mean, in fairness, she for her age, kind of like she had good legs even at her age. So, we all used to sit around there, Mum included, sort of going, oh, here's hot pants again. She'd come in and, she'd be singing and carrying on. It was funny.
Crazy. Yeah. Wow. Well, how's the wine?
It's very good. Tamo's done a good job here. Very good job.
Yeah, you rate it.
I rate it. No, it's very potable.
Excellent.
I'll be getting some more of that.
Oh, Goff would be very pleased to hear that, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to probably wrap this up as part 1.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And I think to give it, a lot of fairness and to sort of, there will be a lot of people that will be really interested to see, this podcast and the rest to come. So I reckon we'll wrap this up as part 1, and then we'll pick it up again with another bottle of Shiraz, maybe.
Oh, happy with the Cabernet.
With the Cab Sav,
happy with the Cabernet. But if it's maybe check out what his white wines are. Has he got a good Verdelho? What's the other one? There's that other varietal up there. It's like there's
I've
Verdelho,
never seen you get into white wine, Greg.
I know. I love my reds, but sort of daytime.
Okay.
Yeah, daytime.
And summer.
Yeah, summer,
Yeah.
daytime. Yeah.
Okay.
Can do that.
All right. Sounds good. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Ray. Cheers, pal.